Right, I think we're live and I think the recording has begun. Welcome to all the delegates online. Welcome to this Ask the Experts session. We have a panel of 7 experts who I will introduce to you. My name is Des Collier, and I greet you from Cape Town in South Africa. Our first panelist is Dr. Darren Detweiler. He is the founder CEO of Detweiler Consulting Group and Associate Professor of Regulatory Affairs of Food for the Northeastern University. We also have Professor Vinaza Karina, who is Dean of the College of Engineering and Business at Gannon University. We have Professor Beena Sukumaran, Dean of College of Engineering and Computing at Miami University. We have Professor Awaladdin Mohammed Shaharun, who is professor of the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the Islamic University of Medina. We have Professor Mahesh Agarwal, who is professor of Mechanical Engineering, also at Gannon University. And we are expecting Professor Elias Sampa, who is professor at Arellano, sorry, that's in Australia. Those are our experts for this session. And let's begin. Let's go straight into it. If you are listening and you would like to ask a question, I have a number of questions which I'll start asking of the experts. We've collected them and we'll get the session moving. If you would like to ask a question of these experts, you can use the chat function, and our technical assistant, Malika, will then alert me to your question. We'll note it and then bring it into the session. Let's begin with Professor Shaharun. Professor, your question first. What role do global ratings or global rankings play in terms of facilitating institutional change? That's your first question. Dr. Shaharun, what role do global rankings play in terms of facilitating institutional change?
Yeah. Okay. Good evening. It's evening now in Medina. Hello, everyone. I think global rankings have actually become basically an agenda that affects almost all universities wherever they are, and some has termed it as a business. I mean, and much has been said about its failings. The fact that it's become over-commercialized, or emphasis on research output and less on teaching. Some academics have even questioned whether quality can be measured accurately and should it be ranked. Anyway, there are, of course, many ranking schemes, and they have different criteria and ascribe different weights to them. And we have to spend a lot of time and effort to answer or to keep up with this. But if we were to ask seriously what kind of uses that the university leaders use ranking for, a report by the OECD mentioned about 7 functions, so which I would like to share for everyone. Firstly, they say that most university leaders, they use rankings for organizational management and strategy in terms of it is a tool to effect their strategic, organizational, managerial, even academic change. The second function is basically for brand and for visibility in terms of trying to compete, get the best students as well as for fundings. They use these rankings for marketing and publicity. Collaboration and partnerships are the third, basically main use in order to boost collaboration and partnership. Then, of course, you need to have these partnerships. Recruitment of students from parents and stakeholders. The fifth one, they talk about benchmarking and analysis. The sixth one is about collecting data which is not freely available. And lastly is about reputation. Now, in what way do they facilitate institutional changes? The point that what I want to share here is that these strategic decisions, these strategic, what do you call it, things that the universities want to achieve, these are basically required the institutional changes. And you have to have a compelling case in order for the institution change to happen. And if since ranking now has become a very important function or a desirable objective, so you can actually use this reason in order to effect much needed changes, where before, if you had not involved in this ranking game, you will not get much change because the powers that be do not wish to change unless it is in their interest. So therefore, in my view, the rankings should be seen as an instrument in order to effect change. Just to share a very personal experience, university that I worked before I came here, we were trying to get some institutional changes, and we had this strategy of going to become a sort of a world-class university. And we started with actually changing the input-based education to outcome-based education. So we required many changes, we required fundings and so on, and we were able to convince the university authorities to allow us to do this change. And actually, we managed to succeed this. And in 2009, in Malaysia, for example, we joined the Washington Accord. And after that, many students from all over the world came and joined the university. So this is just an example of how global rankings can actually be used to effect institutional changes. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So you see that the ranking can be used to make a compelling case, yes, to bring about institutional change, which you achieved, yes, with that last example you gave and attracted more students.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Professor. Can we go to Dr. Detweiler? And very briefly, in about 2 minutes, Dr. Detweiler, your first question is, how do we build capacity and stay inclusive?
I think this is a great question. You know, when we look at the idea of program growth, there's a couple things that happen. I've seen colleges that they'll have, for instance, let's look at graduate programs. I once looked at a college that had over 30 graduate programs, and 19 of them had their own intro to law course. And they were relatively low attended because there were 19 different ones, one for each program. If we look at you know, mitigating limitations for capacity building in terms of, let's say, you know, let's build one interdisciplinary intro to law class. How different can the law be between different academic programs, right? And let's allow that to be a program that has students from different programs, but we have clearly identified the objectives for that course. We've made sure that those objectives are aligned to all these different programs. When we look at that, we can look at the idea of where we might situate our more stronger professors, where we might situate that interdisciplinary feature that students would gravitate towards, that exposure to different ideas beyond the same professors, the same students, the same content areas, but allow the students to gain the ability to meet their objectives there. Far too many times we end up creating our own limitations. We want to see things that fit into certain definitions, and so it makes it easy for us to control certain programs within our courses within our own programs, as opposed to finding certain courses that could be great for interdisciplinary courses. When you look at leadership, communication, there's so many courses that could apply across the board. These are the kind of courses that we need to leverage to really mitigate those limitations and build that capacity. But if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that we are adequately leveraging our marketing, our recruiting, our advising, and that we have our strongest instructional pool for those courses.
Good, okay. But then how do we build capacity and maintain a focus on quality?
Again, we got to make sure that those courses are very well established. We have to make sure that those objectives and the quality we establish for those courses are not only in line with the quality, but maintaining the quality. Just to backtrack a little bit, I've experienced colleges where they have a strong onboarding for a new professor, a new instructor, a new adjunct instructor, et cetera. But there's no sunsetting of that onboarding, or there's no pressure for continuous academic continuous professional development. There's no recertification, or they're onboarded for on ground, and now all of a sudden they're teaching online or hybrid. There needs to be continual support from an academic institution for all instructors that happens over time. Maybe at sunset, you only have the ability to be a certified instructor for so many years before you have to show evidence of being retrained or recertified. And you have to have just because you're proficient and supported for quality of on-ground teaching doesn't mean that you're well qualified for quality instruction online. And the reverse happens as well. You're very qualified to be an online instructor, and now all of a sudden they want you to teach on ground. Do you have what it needs to make sure you're supporting the quality to be able to really help build the quality of that capacity build?
Yeah, I identify with that. So then, if with all this rapid growth and this need to, all the change going on around us and all that sort of thing, what are the concerns for rapid growth without adequate evaluation of student experience?
I think that is something where you look at different academic programs, and I recently saw one. In fact, I have the flyer over here. I was at a conference about a week ago, and it was an undergrad program in a specific area. But I'm an expert in regulatory compliance. There were only 3 courses out of all of the courses the students took that applied to regulatory compliance. There's a need to make sure that there's external validation, that there's strong industry voice, regardless of the discipline, right? There has to be strong regulatory or a strong industry voice to make sure that those students who graduate with a degree in that specific focus, that specific discipline, truly have what it needs to be successful, to land a job, to build a career beyond that, not just happen to have a degree and you'll learn on the job. There needs to be real world connections. There needs to be that voice of industry. There needs to be a partnership in terms of whether it's certification, involvement in, for instance, experiential learning, internships, co-ops, presentations, partnerships with conferences that within those specific academic and disciplinary fields. These all need to be part of that lifeblood of making sure that it's not only a quality program, but it's truly aligned and able to support the students well beyond a job, but to support them with their career. And again, this is one of those things, you know, in regulatory compliance, we talk about how, like with, for instance, with food safety or whatever, you can't support food safety from behind the desk. You have to get out there in the plant. I think the same thing can be said about academia. You cannot support an academic program that's supposed to support students and prepare them for an industry, any kind of a sector or whatever, if everyone is stuck in their cubicles in their offices, you know, at the university. You have to have a percentage of people who are regularly engaged, whether it is with research, whether it is with partnerships in the industry, whether it is professional organizations. That needs to be a mandatory element. And too much time in academics, we place a great focus on publishing and credit hours and grants. And that's, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying there has to be equal focus in terms of true professional service within the discipline. If there's a
right, and I think that is happening increasingly. I think, well,
yes,
hopefully the universities are realizing they need to become relevant.
That's a perfect word.
Yeah?
That is a perfect word, because you know what? Your students, our students, they're going to search for not only the university, but the college, the course, and the instructor. And quite honestly, it's not about price, because the price is what it is, but it is about relevance. Great word to include.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Detweiler. Dr. Hayden. So, Dr. Hayden, then what are the 6 major project categories that are required to assure that project requirements are met? Dr. Hayden, are you with us? Bill. Unmute yourself, Bill.
Does that help?
That's better. That's better. Start again, Bill. What are the 6 major project categories then that are required to ensure that project requirements are met?
I'm going to set aside the technical knowledge. For example, take an engineering program like civil engineering, mechanical, and so on. I'm going to set aside those technical engineering technology courses. I would say that the major courses that need to happen, and I'm going to list them in categories, although I realize some people collapse them into one course, but one has to do with public speaking, is your ability to communicate to citizens at large, which they like to call stakeholders in project world, is your ability to present to them. Another category would be effective listening. Is we need to understand that in understanding language and its meaning, that some of us tend to talk quite abstractly, whereas others will talk in great detail. Well, that's fine, depending upon who you're speaking with or to, because if they're not in sync with the level of conversation that you're communicating, then there's an excellent chance that you'll be going around in circles for quite some time, or worse, they may just ignore, say thank you and walk away. The other is in writing. Writing, not just technically, but writing to the audience based on who the audience is. Understanding the difference between writing the background for technical work to citizens of a community compared to writing the same report to regulatory agencies who have to approve it. The other is your ability to hold routine communication / project meetings from a status point of view. An example of that specific would be every week on Monday morning from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in a room that has no chairs, no table, no one brings in coffee or drink. You have in the project managers who will be doing work that week. And every project manager gets a maximum of 1.5 minutes to say what they need to do their job that week. And there's no crosstalk. So if John is going to speak, he'll say that I need Mary in software engineering who set up the schedule program to meet with me to go over this week's needs, period, and so on. That type of behavior, rather than Excel spreadsheets run by IT people that just pile up the paper. The other
okay,
is...
So Bill, using the few categories you've mentioned there, saying for communication, in about a sentence, would you be able to estimate then the percentage or the average percentage of project failure? That's total percentage of the project.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you that from a data point of view, not just opinionated. One of the things I learned from my advisor in a dissertation was there's a difference between the right to use the word predictable and anticipated. That straightened me out. I can tell you it's predictable that across the board in engineered projects, multidiscipline engineered project, that less than 15% of an answer to the question why projects fail is due to technology. The other 70 to 80% is due to knowledge is missing in the skill set of engineers to deal with people, to deal with process and leadership, or the lack thereof, or a misunderstanding of.
Okay, so that's in a particular project, an engineering project, all right? So then, for those categories you've just used there for the engineering project, the category of failure, what degree of requirements is necessary to master that then?
You mean in terms of the non-technical requirements?
Yeah, or pick a category and say what degree of requirements are needed then to make up that shortfall?
Is the educational system needs to incorporate that type of learning, bringing in people who are not engineers. We have to get over the idea that the source of all useful knowledge will come from other engineers. Matter of fact, we even have unnecessary conflicts, say, between structural, civil, and mechanical over an issue in a project. And so the issue will be bringing people in to teach a skill as simple and as profound as the facilitation of a meeting. Is facilitating a meeting means controlling it, seeing to it that there's no interruptions, seeing to it no one gets to make a point in more than 2 minutes, seeing to it if someone decides not to talk, that you say, fine, but I'm going to come around and get back to you. Seeing to it when we're talking about a water project, someone wants to talk about a zoo, and we stop them immediately and put up on a piece of paper a so-called parking lot. We write, these parking lot is stuff we'll get to later. So you put up on the sheet zoo discussion, and you get right back to the agenda. And so that's a skill set most project meetings don't have. The most familiar example that I get from clients who are in engineering companies who run project meetings is the project's so-called startup meeting has a project manager facilitating the lead technical disciplines in the room. And as quick as that individual can, he goes down an agenda and has to ask the question, does anyone have a question? And he's asking that question while he's starting to rise from the table. And someone in the back of the room will say, pardon me, I could be mistaken, but what about the X and Y and this one thing on the Z before we get going? The project manager typically will say, you know, that, Sally, that's a really good question, and we need to answer it. But, you know, we do have a project schedule. You guys got to leave this room, get out there, and get things going. And Sally, I'll catch up to you later. When I ask people, how frequently does that guy ever get back to Sally? The usual answer is never.
Yeah. Okay, Bill, I'm going to exercise my schedule authority now. Thank you for your input.
Thanks for the question.
Good, man. Yeah, thank you for that. Professor Agarwal, Professor Agarwal, coming to you. What are the most critical steps then that institutions are taking in keeping up with recent trends in higher education? We've had some input now saying these are the things that are missing, these are the challenges, and we've had some business people saying, you know, this is what's lacking, people who come to where we are. Okay, so what are the most critical steps that institutions are taking in keeping up? What are they trying to do?
Well, there are a number of recent trends in higher education, from student to faculty to the institutions, all different areas. And institutions have to adapt to make sure that they can still survive and they can keep up with the latest trend in the higher education. So one of the things institutions start doing, they start offering some new programs to meet the employee demand. For example, business analytics has been a very popular program. Cybersecurity, cyber engineering. These are the kind of programs which institutions start offering because they offer them the opportunity to make sure that their graduates are being hired by the industry and what the industry needs today. Along with that, of course, they start offering some new courses for the students because students are coming with a diverse background. They have all different kind of issues. So they start offering courses such as wellness course. They start making sure that we start emphasizing on diversity, equity, and inclusion because these kids are coming today with a very diverse background in there. They want to make sure that they find a number of ways to connect with the students, to engage with the students, because students nowadays are free to go anywhere they want to go. And they want to make sure that the students who are interested in coming to their institution, they keep engaging with them. And they can engage with early all discussions. They do all different kind of things. They have to go through the social medias. They look into the emails. They need to communicate with these students early enough, to make sure that they can get what they need, and the students are able to get what exactly they need. Another issue has been that cut down in the financial aid. A lot of government agencies, private corporations, they're cutting back states funding. They have been going down. So university have to find the new ways to supplement their scholarship so the student can finish their education in there. They need to find the different ways, additional ways to pay for the college.
All right, but how then are the institutions empowering their faculty for education reform? You said some promising things there that are happening and being done, but how are the institutions helping the faculty for education for reform?
So basically what institutions have to do is they are engaging faculty in critical decision-making processes by providing opportunity to participate in management regarding teaching, job-related responsibilities, all different kind of things. They need to provide more skill training to these faculty, opportunities for more professional development, starting employees recognition program. They want to motivate the faculty. They want to make sure that this is how they're going to do in there. They need to provide them, allowing them autonomy of decision-making. Those are the kind of things. Flexibility comes, another things come to mind is the flexibility. If the faculty is, due to the COVID-19, we saw that a lot of faculty were teaching courses online because that's what was required to us. Now, institutions are looking into the possibility and saying, well, this person is not able to teach face-to-face because he might have medical problems, reasonings, and things like those. So they start offering them flexibility and say, okay, you can start online course, if that's what you want to do. Another important thing has been the investing in the technology infrastructure, provided more technology enhanced technology tool to the faculty, because that's how they're empowering the faculties in there.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Following from there, really, actually, is Professor Sukumaran. Professor Sukumaran, he says, we are seeing rapid changes in engineering and technology-related jobs. I think we're gathering that from the conversation, all right? We are seeing rapid changes in engineering and technology-related jobs of the future. So if you would like to add, Professor, sorry, lost there. How then are institutions pivoting to address these changes?
I agree with all my colleagues. Actually, I think Dr. Agarwal made a good point, and Dr. Detweiler as well, in that we need to listen to industry, get their input on what they're really looking for. They're looking for this broad-based education foundation for our students, and on which we build a technical core. But if you look at where our profession is headed and where our industries are headed, you're seeing a huge emphasis on automation and huge emphasis on data analytics, whatever engineering background you might come from, right? So we need to pivot our course offerings as such, and also revise some of our current degree offerings such that they meet these new requirements. So you have to have this ongoing outcomes evaluation that Professor Shaharoon talked about, on looking at, what kind of outcomes do we want for our students, and also envisioning some of the degrees of the future. Right? So what are some of the degrees of the future that we need that are cross-disciplinary, maybe across engineering, but maybe even beyond engineering, which we heard from lots of my colleagues, right? Harnessing some of those strengths. So for example, you need a lot of robotics engineers. We started our undergraduate degree in robotics engineering. It is housed in electrical engineering, but it draws technical expertise from all our electrical, mechanical, chemical, and computer science, right? But we also need the communications and the leadership skills and all these other things layered on as well. So I think we just have to, we have to be these futuristic technologists, I would think, and sort of re-envision where our profession is headed, and think about what kind of training we need to provide. So we have a very old manufacturing engineering program in our college. And if I look at our area in Ohio, Pennsylvania, it's the manufacturing core of the US. And so we are, in fact, now redesigning a manufacturing engineering curriculum to a smart manufacturing program. Because that is what industry is saying we have to pivot to, and that is what we are hoping students will come to.
Right, and so that's also having to cater for students who are increasingly diverse in their backgrounds, yeah? And to end off for you, the question for you, Prof, is what do you see as being the grand challenges of the planet at the moment? And how are we preparing students for this future?
Right. I mean, this year has been quite an eventful year in terms of climate, catastrophes that are impacting the world. And it's been ongoing. I would say, climate change is one of our grand challenges of the future. I mean, the National Academies has 14 grand challenges that they've identified. And we have students who work on that, right? And I'm a civil engineer by training. So when I think about the grand challenges our planets face, in every one of my courses, I would talk about how are we redesigning for a future. When I was in New Jersey, it was a future where flooding was imminent and was occurring annually. So depending on where you are, in some areas it's subsidence due to drawdown of aquifers, right? In some areas it's drought, in some areas it's wildfires. We need to bring that into the classroom and say how our technical training has to change to address some of these impacts that we are seeing. So I think, and students respond to that. Students get excited when they can see, things that is impacting their lives, and we bring that into the course content. I think it becomes more relevant, and that is part of also teaching inclusively to a diverse student population.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Karina, if I could turn to you now. Sure. I imagine you'd agree with the what institutions are trying to do to address the changes in students and preparing them for these changes out there. And also you would agree with what faculties are trying to do. The question I'd like to put to you, Professor Karina, is how are institutions embracing entrepreneurial ecosystems as a means to contribute to economic development and prepare our students for that future? When you say that again, so how are institutions embracing entrepreneurial ecosystems as a means to contribute to the economic development and to prepare our students for that future?
Thank you, Des, for the question. So I, as you stated earlier, yeah, I do agree with many of the comments made earlier. In terms of entrepreneurial ecosystems, I lead the College of Engineering and Business, which is a little bit of a unique combination. Under us, we have a technology incubator. We are connected very much with the chamber and different economic development units here to look at small businesses or entrepreneurs and connect them, not just with the expertise we have here in terms of our faculty, but really provide an opportunity for our students to see what are these new trends in terms of innovation. We have right now projects in which they're assessing, placing sensors in the water in the lake actually, to monitor lake health, which going back to Bina's, she just discussed grand challenges. Water security is one of the biggest issues that we're going to be facing in the currently and in the future. So we have been able to capitalize relationships with Small Business Development Office, technology incubators, and companies in the area and outside the area to showcase how is it that we can provide, if it's R&D or really students to start interning with them remotely as they are trying to solve some of these issues internally. We invest quite a bit in supporting new companies, specifically tech companies here through the incubator. And the goal really is for those companies to be successful and stay here and be really a means for them to employ students and contribute really to new jobs in the region. So we connect with organizations such as I said, the Small Business Development Office. Ben Franklin is a huge funder in our area in Pennsylvania. We're making connections with Made in America. Bina alluded to some of that is very strong in Ohio. And we're creating some of those opportunities here, really just increasing jobs and getting those opportunities as well as we contribute to really economic development and just job creation as a rule. We have a lot of people that want to invest in talent, looking at what that talent is going to be and the skill sets for the future. We talked about analytics, we talked about cybersecurity. I mean, that these are all areas that are here to stay, and how is it that they're infused in the curriculum where digital transformation that is happening today is not really a career, it's really about skill sets that their students are getting through their time here. I don't know if I answered that question. I think I went into the discussion of digital because we tend to have a lot of that happening with the needs that we see of the new entrepreneurs coming here looking for support and skills from students.
Right. And how are you feeling that is affecting your delivery of education?
So, in the last 2 years, when people talked about digital transformation, they were really talking about access. I think that what it really means needs to be embraced in terms of, I think Dr. Agrawal mentioned that it goes from capacity of faculty, the traditional way we teach in lecturing, that is really not what the student of today is expecting. How do we make sure that the time they're engaging with the faculty is meaningful or is used in the most effective way? How do we really leverage technology from faculty development, to understanding what the student is coming in, and we assess where they are and where we can meet, where's that middle ground. How is our environments, our infrastructure, the regular classroom environment needs to change to provide for that type of delivery, and what those hybrid models might be in the future. I think there's quite a bit of things that we did during COVID just to survive. And now we really need to sit back and say, where are we today and what do we need to adapt and change versus let's all come to campus again and go back to the traditional way that we taught before. I think there is a paradigm that has changed, and we really need to look to the future to really stay relevant, as Darren was talking about earlier.
In terms of hybrid education that you mentioned as one of your methods, do you think digital will replace face-to-face?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think digital needs to be used appropriately to supplement the time that we spend with the students in the classroom. And that's really the paradigm today, is how do we really evolve to the appropriate use of technology and digital resources so that the time in the classroom is really meaningful and used in the most effective way. We have a lot of faculty that come from PhDs that might have not taken courses and really developing themselves as educators versus just really being individuals with an area of expertise. So we do need to bring everybody back to a level of development where they understand the tools that really allow us to move forward, because that's really what is expected today. The students coming from high school have a very different perception of what they need or what the classroom experience needs to be, because innovation has been moved now to K through 12. So we need to make sure that innovation in higher ed is at the same level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to check if our 7th panel member is with us. Not with us yet. Malika, has Professor Sampa given any indication? I'm just talking to our assistant, Professor Malika. Has Professor Sampa arrived with us yet? I don't see him on our screens. Not yet, okay. What I'd like to do then is throw out a question, and any of you could take it. It's a question I intended for Professor Sampa, but I'm going to put it out there now, and if he arrives, then he can argue with me if he wants to jump in. All right, let me put this question out there, and if you would just volunteer to pick it up. The question is this: what are the essential elements of curriculum design? Bearing in mind all the lovely things you've been saying, and all the change and the new methodologies you've got to use, and et cetera, and the project requirements, what are the essentials of curriculum design? Who'd like to take that? Don't make me pick on you.
I can probably talk about this a little bit here. I have.
Please, thank you.
Sure. I've been involved in designing instructor onboarding for some time. And, we look at the idea of not only program design, but course design. Either way, you need to look at the idea of introducing, developing, and practicing. If you want students to be able to do something near the end of their academic journey, for instance, deliver a poster presentation, create a video, a professional portfolio, to give a speech, whatever it is, if that's the first time they've been exposed to that skill set, or if you want students to analyze a specific piece of content, and again, that's the first time they've been exposed to that skill set or that content, then you're not really supporting students for success. So it's not about making sure that we assess students. We have to have a balance between formative and summative assessments within courses, But we also have to look at the program level in terms of where are we introducing specific content or skill sets that students can build upon in later courses, such that, again, when they're taking their final courses, this is not the first time they're being asked to do something, and they're having to learn a new skill set and some content. So there has to be a bigger picture, program-wide leadership over course development, instructional development, and assessment development that really ties everything together. This is something that no one professor can do. No one adjunct instructor definitely cannot do. This requires an academic leadership oversight over a program by someone who is capable and experienced in really evaluating the bigger picture to make sure that there is a health and maturity growth, if you will, of the student through that program, and they are not left at the petty foibles and whims of the marketing and advising team who are not intricately involved in that process.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add anything to that? All right, then here's quite a challenging question for you. Hang on, I'm getting a message from Malika. Let me see what's happening. All right, thank you. Professor Sampa is not available at this time. So I'm going to put one of the really challenging questions to all of you now. And this is, what are the essential, what should teachers, lecturers, and professors focus on to be faithful to authentic transformational outcome-based education? That was for Professor Sampa, I agree, but I think it's a crucial question, bearing in mind that we're talking about transformational outcome-based education. And so, in your views, maybe we just go one for one very quickly, one. What do teachers, lecturers, and professors need to focus on to be faithful to transformational outcome-based education? So we just start at the top and move along.
Should I comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Bill Hayden here is, I would say that it's a process, and they ought to start where the process will end. If I understand it right, and you'll correct me if I'm missing this, but the whole purpose of the educational system at all levels of excellence is to put people out in their chosen fields of endeavor. And so the place to start is in those fields, and to get some knowledge from profit and nonprofit organizations. And in today's world, don't ask me how, but they need to pull in countries other than the one you're in, regardless of what part of the planet you teach in or your life is in, so that we equip the students with an answer to your question at the front end of that process that is transitional to those outcomes.
Okay, yeah.
This is Darren Detweiler. If I could add a completely different take on an answer to this question.
Yes.
One of the things that when I consult with instructors based on students' feedback and professional evaluation, that always amazes me when we look at transitional growth of the student and objective-based education. It's amazing how many times, whether I've done this and seen this, whether you're talking about 10-year-olds or doctoral candidates. Here's the objective, here's a learning activity. One thing that instructors fail to do is ask students, what do you already know about this topic? What do you want to learn? What are your questions about this topic? And then when we engage in the learning activity, the lecture, whatever it is, afterwards, what did you learn? How did you change behaviorally or knowledge and ask those questions. Not that there's a right or wrong answer, but it's giving the students the ability to kind of evaluate themselves in terms of where I was before and how this learning activity, lecture, whatever, impacted my transformation. And for the students to be able to capture that and reflect on that on their own, at several times throughout the learning term, that, you know, whether it's a semester, year, quarter, whatever, is foundational for students to be able to recognize and even just perceive and grasp and reflect on their own transition. Especially with multiple disciplines and large classes and online, on ground, whatever it is, still to give students the opportunity to engage in those type of questions is, I think, something that is far too often missing today.
Thank you. Yes.
I can add to Dr. Darren there. I think it is very important for us to understand we need to train these teachers and professors and lecturers to make sure they understand what kind of assessment we are looking for, what is needed in there, what these people have to do. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of assessments, you know, because I'm part of ABET, you know, and I have seen a lot of different, all around the world, basically, I have seen. And half of the time, they really don't know exactly what they need to collect, what they need to do. We need to make sure, we need to train these professors and faculty members to make sure they understand exactly what is needed, because assessment ultimately leads to the improvement of the program. And we need to make sure they understand exactly what needs to be done in order to improve their program. So I think that's the basic problem, is that they are not very familiar with exactly why we are doing assessment, what we need to do assessment, and how we can use this to improve the program.
Well, imagine too, if they have an assessment, or let's say they have a rubric, and 80% of the grade on that rubric is really just assessing their ability to write a paper. It's not based on their content knowledge or their skill set aligned to any discipline other than being able to write a 5-paragraph essay or something like that. So even if with an assessment, with a rubric, our instructor is actually assessing what needs to be assessed to evaluate whether or not a student has met an outcome, a goal, a learning target.
Right.
And after that, what they will do many times is they take the average of all these rubric elements in there and come up with the answer saying, oh yeah, we satisfy the outcome. While you don't realize that the individual component of that rubric might be the one you need to satisfy. Because if you don't satisfy those individual elements in there, then you cannot make the improvement of the program. You have no idea. All the weaknesses are masked, you know, if you take an average and those kind of things. So I think it is important that we identify for whatever outcome we are looking for. You know, there are different outcomes. State has outcomes, ABET has outcomes, or the countries had outcomes, you know, all different kind of things. We need to make sure that for each outcome, there is a different way. There is a way to do this assessment on the outcome. So we can look at the skill, what skill sets these students are acquiring, whether they are getting those from assessment or not. That will indicate by the assessment whether they are getting those or not. So I think that the key is to train these people there.
Okay, can I jump in there and just go back to a comment that was made earlier? We've got about 5 minutes left. A comment was made earlier that let's start with the outcome in mind. And given that transformational OBE by definition is future focused. By Dr. Spady's definition of OBE, if it's transformational, what makes it transformational is that it is future focused. And many people are interpreting the transformation as being what transformation happens in the person, which is also part of it. But the essence of transformational OBE is that it starts with the future and designs back. So if we start with the outcome in mind, and that is now the future, that the students who are going to leave in 15 years' time, are we equipping them for that future?
You can just add to this argument.
Yes.
Where do you get the information that in 15 years, what are the skill sets that are needed? So you need to talk to the stakeholders. And this is where many academicians, they fail to talk. They design it based on hearsay or whatever it is, but you need to engage the people from industry, the stakeholders that actually going to. So I think this is very important in design for OBE. Thank you.
Good point, I think. Thank you for that. Yes. Anybody else like to add?
I agree with Professor Shaharoon on that.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Professor Veena.
Go ahead, lady. Yes.
Yes. If we are training students for this future that is 15 years ahead, I do think we have to talk to the stakeholders that will be employing our students that we are graduating, which might be industry, which might be universities, depending on which track they take, and to see, are they suited for that? And are they adaptable? Are they, continuously learning, continuously changing? And do they have that systems mindset to be in these, areas that are rapidly changing? And can they adapt to those changes quickly? In fact, when I meet with lots of our alumni, as well as corporate leaders, the first question I do ask them is, based on the students you have been getting from our institution, what is your feedback? Because I value that feedback, because I want to hear what are we doing well and where do we need to change so that we are meeting these needs, at least at present, but hopefully in 15 years too.
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
I
must apologize. I have an alert from Malika. We've got only just 2 minutes left and we don't want the session to end abruptly. She's asking us to conclude.
I would like to suggest the way to conclude is one of the things that everyone has on their mind, generally speaking, has to do with how do we take all of these really good ideas about today into the future back to today? What's a framework for that? I would ask you to write down this website, NIST.gov, NIST.gov. When you get in there, look for the program Baldrige, BALDRIGE. So NIST.gov, under the programs, look for Baldrige, BALDRIGE. And when you open it, you'll see documents for different fields. One of them is education. And under the education set, you'll see no shortage of forms that many of you could quickly use yourself to pull together these desperate ideas everyone has into a framework it doesn't tell you how to do any of the work that you're expert at. It leads you by asking questions. And so I would strongly encourage you to consider that as a model for future meetings with other colleagues on the subject of where are we now based on our experience, where do we want to go based on the powers to be and so on. But it would give you a common framework to share.
Excellent, thank you. That was ironically the thrust of the presentation that I have been giving, is to draw up an action plan as to how to go about doing this in your institution. And so I would love to see that website. So thank you for that reference. And then the last 30 seconds, we're wrapping this up. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the delegates online. And we do hope you found this session interesting. Thank you and have a good day or good night from wherever you are in the world. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.